All right, trash talkers. Nash and I are back from vacation and we are recording bright and early this morning to make up for lost time. Nash, you want to tell the people what we did?
We went to Disney.
We went to Disney.
Great time.
Actually, Disney Corporation does own ABC, so when we were in Hollywood Studios, we did see the Bachelor sign. It's about the size of a license plate, but it was there. All right, so because we were on vacation, we do have 2 episodes to cover tonight, or this morning, I should say. So let's not waste too much time and let's get right into it. Nash, I would say the theme from the past 2 weeks was who's here for the right reasons versus previous seasons where the theme has been the most dramatic season yet. We're switching to who's here for the right reasons. So I feel like it's one of those coined Bachelor phrases that we usually hear a lot, especially when it comes to the Bachelorette versus the Bachelor, because as we saw on Matt James' season last year, he might not have been there for the right reasons because he didn't actually marry anyone at the end.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that's a good point. I mean, really thinking about it, at the end of the day, he didn't commit to somebody. Or it's like he didn't even know who he committed to in the end, really.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we talked about last season, specifically about Matt James, is he kept saying, oh, I saw it work for Tyler, I saw it work for Tyler. Well, what he saw work for Tyler was Tyler got dumped from the show, started marrying a bunch of supermodels, and became a social media influencer, and now makes a stupid amount of money to take his shirt off and post about it. So yeah, in a way, I guess it did work for Tyler C., but not in the way it was supposed to work. So when I actually haven't really thought about it, but when I put it the way I just did, it kind of makes me question Matt James and what he actually wanted to come from that season. But we're not here to talk about him. We're here to talk about Katie's season. So, Nash, I have a question for you based on this theme that we're talking about. As a guy watching this show, what motivation do you see coming from these guys? Do you think a lot of them are genuinely there because they want a relationship with Katie and they want to be engaged? Or do you think they're there for the social media clout and whatnot?
See, I would assume they're just there for the clout, like most of them. Now, watching the show, does it seem like that? Does it feel like that most of the time? I feel like no, but I think some people definitely that's just what you get. Especially also considering, that you have the opportunity to maybe be the next Bachelor. Yeah,
and as we've mentioned on the show before, we have heard that the Bachelor or Bachelorette makes about 6 figures for being in that role during their time on the show. So it's not a bad gig, not at all. If I'm being completely honest, seeing all of these, because for those who don't know, I manage our Instagram account, Trash Talk TV Podcast, if you don't go follow it. Woo-hoo. But part of my job is to follow up with Bachelor news and all the Bachelor alum and see what they're up to. And a lot of them don't seem to go back to their day jobs after being on the show. Even the ones that didn't make it that far, they become Instagram influencers and they start modeling and doing all these things. And it's like, I work 2 jobs, so if someone was like, hey, you want to maybe date someone for a few weeks and then get paid to be on social media for the rest of your life, I'd be like, hell yeah. I work too hard. I would 100% take that opportunity. Now, I'll say this and talk big, but when it comes right down to it, I don't think I'd be able to get on this show and lie to a person to their face about why I'm there, because I'm not that bad of a person, but I'd be lying if I said it's not a nice idea.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I feel like oftentimes, if they genuinely believe this is like a good process, they're kind of lying to themselves,
Yeah, I don't think this process really works at all. I think it makes you think you're falling in love with a person because when it comes right down to it, you want that person because you're in a room with 30 other people that also want that person. I recently read a book about this theory called mimetic desire, which is essentially that what we want is a basis of what other people want. In other words, we mimic what they want. Social media is a big influence on this, but it really does apply to this show. I think the fact that you have all these men and women who have this idea going into it, hey, I want to fall in love with this person, I want to get engaged with this person. Oh, by the way, the 30 people next to me also want that same thing. It makes you want them even more. You know, whether you actually fall in love with them or not, I feel like a lot of it is just the psychology and the environment. I'm not sure that it's a genuine connection, and I feel like that's why a good portion of these relationships don't work. But that's just my take on it.
No,
so
I think that's a very educated opinion on it.
I would say so too. I think I sounded pretty smart. So let's get into last week's episode, kicking it off strong. And we have our sex positive group date. So Nash, if you recall, this was the date where they all had to show Katie how they would be the best lover in whatever that meant to them. What were your initial thoughts on the date?
I like the way they did it because they just kind of had like open mic night essentially about it. They kind of was like everybody be either funny or sing. It's like they didn't tell them that. That's essentially what it came up to. And I don't know. I thought that was much better than some other challenge you could do for this.
Yeah, I would have to agree.
The sock puppets made me very uncomfortable, but I think everything else, it was like, okay, yeah, that's, people just talking up their game. That's fine.
Yeah, I really like the direction this date took, because it could have went the other way very, very quickly, and it would have been very uncomfortable. I also watch the show every week with my mom, so I'm really, really glad that it didn't get weird. But overall, I feel like it was still an uncomfortable date, but the guys made the best of it. They took it in the best direction, and we knew a date like this was coming at some point, but it was still kind of weird nonetheless. Now, I think what we got from it was actually really, really good. We got from Mike him showing more of himself and being vulnerable, which is really what you want from these shows. You don't want people to just be hypersexual and weird, because that too soon is gonna, maybe not for Katie, but for most people, that's kind of like a whoa, let's calm down there. Not everyone's as comfortable, but overall, I think it was a pretty good date. It showed creativity. I personally don't know what I would have done in that situation, because one of the things I do every single week is I put myself in their shoes, and I'm usually faced with the reality that, yeah, I definitely couldn't be on the show because I wouldn't want to do that. I just would get too weird and awkward about it. Another thought I had, just a quick little thought, is one of the things the men kept saying is, oh, I've never been with a woman this open about her sexuality and blah, 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 and this and that. And that threw me for a loop for a second and almost made me say, well, if a woman's never been that open about it with you, it's probably because you didn't make her feel comfortable to be that open with you. I mean, would you agree? Would you say that's on the guys, or do you think that's just the nature of the relationships they've had? Because that one I was like, that's kind of on you, my guy.
I don't know. I feel like that's kind of weird, especially for how many of them that there are. Although, obviously not all of them said that, but I just feel like that is kind of a weird comment if you aren't going to say those are the kinds of relationships that you'd have. You assume you'd come across that, or at least people like that,
Yeah, especially considering that a lot of these guys are in their late 20s, early 30s. So they've had intimate relationships before for the most of them, and it's like you've gone to be a 30-year-old man and not been able to have these types of conversations with your significant other. Like, glad you're not dating me. But I guess we have, all different levels of comfort. But for me, that was kind of like, maybe that's on you. Maybe Katie's a bit much for you if you've never been able to have those conversations before. But personal take. So we also have to talk about Carl in this episode, our motivational speaker. Something that really, really bothers me personally about Carl is I wouldn't even say he's a villain, and I know that's not the popular opinion out there right now, but the reason I say that is because I feel like the majority of guys are like Carl, like his cockiness, his arrogance, his self-centered impression of what's happening. You know, he kept calling it a game, and he kept thinking it was only about him. I don't even think, you know, despite what he was trying to put off, he's another person that I don't think was in it for Katie, but I don't necessarily think that's because he was in it for Instagram clout. I think he's just a person who probably only thinks of himself in every relationship he's had. And again, I think that is more common in men, at least in my experience, than it isn't. So that is what bothered me, and I feel like the guys saying otherwise, it's like they probably have 10 people in their immediate friend group that are the exact same as Carl. But Nash, I'm sure you might have a different perspective on that one. Mine's a little biased.
Yeah, and he was the motivational speaker, right?
Yes.
Yeah, never trust. I don't trust those people. I'm sorry. I never trust them. Because it's like, I just imagine those types of people. They're like in a huge corporate setting, and they're there to like get everybody pumped up, do stupid team building exercises. And it's statistically proven, and there's scientific evidence that shows that stuff never does anything. And it's so, I don't know, never trusted him from the beginning. And
okay,
I think
I'll agree
right.
with you on that.
He's that kind of guy, you know? He's the guy with the job that's kind of made up.
Yeah. Dude, I feel like the thing about motivational speakers is they are by nature a little bit manipulative, because they know the exact words to say to get people in a certain mood, and they're essentially being paid to manipulate people. Like, to your example of them going in to corporate settings, you know, that's what corporations do instead of giving their employees what they actually want, right?
Yeah.
It's like, if we can make you pretend or think that you're happy, we don't actually have to do the things that'll make you happy. So I didn't think about it in that sense with his career choice, but I definitely agree with you.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't expect that so early.
It is pretty early for me, especially to be agreeing with you on something like this.
And I do have to say, I feel like for a motivational speaker, I feel like he's not that good at speaking.
Oh, he wasn't. That speech was awkward and painful to watch, and we weren't even there, you know?
Yeah.
We didn't even have to see the whole thing, and it was still painful. But as we saw at the end of that date, Mike, who is also our self-proclaimed virgin this season, did win, but Thomas was the one who went home with the rose from the group date. I'm a little shocked by that. I personally think, I feel like we'll talk about it more when we get to the next episode, because it becomes very, very prevalent. But I feel like there's no real substance to Thomas. I feel like, much like Carl, he knows, well, it didn't work out for Carl. I don't think he's that good of a motivational speaker. But same idea still persists, where Thomas knows what to say. He's got a pretty smile. He's charming. He's telling Katie everything he knows she wants to hear, and not much else, you know? He's just showering her with compliments and making her feel good, and making her feel like she makes him feel good, which, if you've ever watched a season of The Bachelor, it's very easy to fake those things. It's very easy to see how comments like that will get somebody far. And I feel like that's what Thomas is doing. I haven't seen anything personable about him. He's only pushing the focus onto Katie and making her feel good. And she's associating feeling good as feelings for him. And I don't think it's the same thing. So I can't say I'm a fan of Thomas. We'll obviously get into it more later, but what would you say about that?
Okay, which one was Thomas?
Tall guy. Very tall.
Very tall guy?
Tall guy, really nice smile. I'll give him that. The guy's got a really good smile.
Do you have any other adjectives? I usually don't remember men because of their nice smile.
Probably don't stand out to you when they're very charming either.
No,
he wore a blue suit on the first night. He was the first guy out of the limos on the first night.
Okay. Yeah, no, that was a little surprising. I do remember him. That was a little surprising because I feel like when he talks outside of moments with Katie, it doesn't sound as intelligent.
No, sounds like he's got no personality almost. We don't really see much of him when he's with the guys. He's kind of just there.
Dang, don't hold back. Tell me how you feel, dog.
It's too early in the morning to filter myself. We're just going to say it like it is.
The realest episode of Trash Talk TV, ladies and gentlemen, right here.
The unfiltered episode of Trash Talk TV. But not unedited. Thanks, Luke. So let's get on to our first one-on-one date of the season, which went to Greg, who was also the recipient of the first impression rose. Nash, what'd you think of the two of them?
Okay. Which one's Greg?
Greg, they went fishing.
Greg went fishing. He's a guy that didn't know how to do the camping thing.
Yeah, he didn't know how to put up a tent.
I like that. I thought it was a good one.
I thought it was a cute date. I think it definitely got more personal and emotional than it was initially meant to be, maybe, but I thought it was a cute date. I will say I do have one complaint about the date. They made a toilet together, that's a big step. It's like a wait till marriage until you build a toilet in the woods together. But not only did they make a toilet in the woods together, they then proceeded to make out on the toilet, which I thought was just very weird. I'm going to be very upfront about that. It's weird. It's one thing if you've been together for years and, the magic has faded away and you guys are very open. But for a first date to make out on the toilet, I think that's a big step.
Well, I mean, honestly, where do you go from there? How do you get closer than that?
You don't. Honestly, they just skipped every base that you could hit and went straight to comfortable marriage.
To toilet kissing.
Well, I mean, that's like the equivalent of keeping the door open when you go to the bathroom and live together, which, that's a big step. It happens, but it is a big step. It's a whole new level of comfort.
That's just convenience, let's be honest.
All right, well, we have different perspectives on that one, and on that note, I'm going to end that conversation. So let's move on to our second group date for this episode, mud wrestling. For whatever reason, there's always a fighting episode, whether it's boxing or water sports that are very physical. I don't get the appeal. I guess the producers do it whenever there's tension in the house, which obviously we saw that tension between Cody and Aaron. They knew each other from home. I definitely feel like I believed Aaron, and I trust that he's being truthful. I don't think he's a liar per se, but I do think, in my personal opinion, Aaron's a bit dramatic and maybe a bit immature. And I say that because of the language he uses when he's upset. He goes from, yeah, I don't like this guy to he's disgusting. I would never like this guy. I hate this man. And it's like with zero context and with zero prompting. I feel like and that's why I say he's immature. I would say a mature man would approach it and use language that's a bit less extreme and a bit less forceful.
That's a very man, you're really diving deep this episode.
It's the coffee, man. It's the coffee.
It's
got a little whiskey in it, I must say.
Oh my gosh.
No, it doesn't. I wish though.
This is a chaotic episode. But I'll have to say I kind of agree with that. Like that seems very astute.
I mean, that's just my take. It rubs me the wrong way. I imagine, a ticked off frat boy speaking in much the same manner. So anybody who is going to come off like they're still in that mindset just is going to rub me the wrong way a little bit. I mean, I'm not saying he's a bad guy, and I do think he's genuine, and I do think he is there for the right reasons. We'll see if I'm right on that. I just think he's a little little immature, and that's not a bad thing. He's one of the younger guys, so I think it's to be expected. But I think in terms of him fighting for Katie's heart with the type of person she is, I'm not sure that that's going to work out in his favor in the end.
That it's a lasting type of commitment.
Yeah, definitely. But we'll see how that ends for him. Let's segue into the next episode, because that's where things get really, really juicy. And in episode 2, we end up with a rose ceremony that we don't see the results of. Pick up on episode 3 right from there. Again, our boy Carl, the motivational speaker, really, really stirring the pot. With everything else that happens in this 3rd episode, though, I feel like Carl's situation is kind of minuscule and doesn't matter, but I would still like to talk about it because it becomes relevant later on. I mean, let's answer this truthfully. We obviously know how the rest of the episode goes, Nash, but when Carl was telling Katie that there were other men in the house who were there for the wrong reasons but wouldn't name any names, did you believe him?
No, not at all.
Okay, I didn't either, to be honest. And as we get into the episode, we'll talk about the validity of what he says, but I really do feel like he was saying that just to pin the other guys and Katie against each other. I think he's a very manipulative person, and he continued to call this whole thing a game, and I think he truly did see it that way in his head. Maybe not necessarily with the intention of getting clout or to hurt Katie, but as a almost, I guess, confidence booster. Because if you can go on the show and win the heart of the Bachelorette when you're competing against 30 other men, you must be an alpha type, right? You are the alpha male in the room. And I think that's what Carl was going for more than anything else. So I think he saw getting Katie to trust him and be vulnerable to him and pinning it against the other guys would have been a great way to go about that in terms of his strategy.
Yeah, and he kind of did it in a way. They really, all the other guys in the house, they really got to it really quickly in like a believable way. Like they cut to the root of it where they knew he didn't have anybody. Like that statement is just so, it's vague enough to be true for it to be plausibly true, you know? It could be real. It probably is true.
Like a horoscope.
Yeah, but the fact that he like didn't actually have one or any specific conversation, they're 100% right in accusing him of doing it just to get inside her head.
Yeah. I mean, the way I see it is if Carl truly did care about Katie and was telling her that out of the goodness of his heart, instead of blasting out the name to all the men there, he would have privately approached the guy and been like, hey, look, if you don't come out and say this, I'm going to, and given the guy the chance to be honest about his intentions and why he was there. But that's not what he did. So I think at the point where Carl said it, he was just pulling it out of thin air. We see a little later on that he might have been right, but I think at the time for Carl, it was just a guess. He was just saying it because the likelihood of it being true was probably there. I mean, you got a room of a little less than 30 guys on a reality TV show. The statistics of one of them being there for the clout is probably pretty high, at least one person. But I don't think he knew that at the time of saying it. I will say something that shocked, I think, everyone, because it's not something we've really ever seen in this context. Mike P calling Carl out upon receiving his rose. That was bold. I really got to tip my hat to Mike because that was bold. I do think it was very strategic of him to wait until that rose was pinned onto his chest to say that.
Yeah.
But to say it in front of everyone like that, that is very bold. It's very brave. I give him my credit for that one.
I will say, however, one thing that kind of surprised me was how much that one rumor totally derailed the whole night.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, I think
I didn't expect that from Katie. That's just all I'm saying. Like what we saw from her last season, it looked like she doesn't stand for it. It looks like she wouldn't take it. But it's like the first instance we get of drama, like it literally shut down almost everything.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason it did that, and again, my perspective as a woman is probably different from yours as a man, and based on previous experiences in relationships, once that doubt is sprinkled in there, especially in such a high stakes moment as, you're not dating for fun, you're dating for marriage in this game or show, shouldn't call it a game, not Carl. The stakes are so much higher. And for someone like Katie who aggressively doesn't want to play around, for that doubt to be there that people are playing around, that is terrifying. When she says that's her biggest fear on the show, I totally get that. It would be mine as well, I think. So to be told that multiple guys there are there just to use her, that'll derail you for a little bit. I will say, I think she handled it probably better than another Bachelorette might. It jarred her for a second, but she consulted with Tayshia and the other one whose name I'm forgetting of right now. But she went to her host, she consulted with them, she said, what are my options? And then she kicked Carl out. I think if she had kept Carl, that would have been very telling, and I think perhaps other Bachelorettes might have. I was a little surprised by the fact that she was even considering keeping Carl in the first place, because there was no substance to any of their conversations that we saw. I wasn't seeing what she might have been seeing. But yeah. I'm not surprised that he went home. I'm glad he went home. But on that night, Aaron did receive the last rose of the group, which I think is also, that might be producer influence, but I think whoever receives the last rose, that's definitely telling. It's almost like a warning. It's like, hey, you're surviving this week, but there's a little bit of doubt there. And that's probably producer influence to make us think that. But I definitely wasn't surprised he received the final rose. I think it was also on the table for him to go home as well, because this is now the second situation he's kind of been heavily involved in. First being Cody, now being Carl. And again, I think Aaron was right in both instances. I don't think he was wrong to kind of push for those people to leave. But we'll see how that plays out for him. Like I said earlier, I don't think Carl and Katie are going to work because I think they're just at different points in their life.
Gosh, man, you should have coffee every time we do this.
I might. Next time I'll do it with whiskey, though. We'll see how that goes.
Oh my God.
All right, so after the rose ceremony, we go into our first group date with Bachelor alum Nick Viall hosting. He's been on like the past 20 seasons in this role. He's a guy who really went from, almost kind of like he made it far in his seasons, but I always got the sense that he did it for clout because he got a lot of it. Like, the man's got a podcast now. He goes back to the show frequently. He's got, this whole social media following. The guy got everything you might want to get if your goal is to only get famous off this show, and he got it. So I personally don't trust the guy. I like him. He seems like he's funny and real, but I definitely feel like he's another guy that, like a Matt James, where I wanted to get out of this what Tyler got out of this, which is dating Instagram models and getting rich, which he is.
I feel so awkward when one of these people, because I have hardly ever watched this show before.
Mm-hmm.
I feel so awkward, and it just seems awkward whenever they bring up somebody that is in the previous show or whatever. And the guys talking about it, looks like, oh man, great guy. He used to be so-and-so. I mean, just fantastic. It's just it sounds like somebody gave them sound bites to say about this person
I'm sure
every
they did.
Single time.
I'm sure they did.
They don't know who that guy is.
I also felt like it was and wasn't a weird type of date for him to host. So this is where the episode starts to get really, really heavy. This was a very heavy episode, and this is kind of where it all starts, and it does not stop once this date gets rolling. I feel like maybe it's just the way they cut the video. We did not see him really doing much at all during this date. We didn't see him prompting, I guess because they wanted to focus on the guys and their answers. But I thought it was weird to have a guy like Nick host a date where people have to be vulnerable, because I don't perceive him as a person that makes someone want to open up. Certainly, I think he's someone that would call people out on lying or not giving enough. But I don't think I'd want to open up my deepest, darkest secrets to this man.
I wouldn't, just off the principle of it. But why do you say it? Why do you say that?
Just because I've heard snippets of his podcast, and he's very upfront and very, is going to tell it like it is. And I don't think you want a person who's going to tell it like it is when you're bearing your soul to them. Like, I think this would have been a date where more involvement from our two Bachelorette alum co-hosts would have been better, because I feel like they would have made people feel safer and more welcome. Not that Nick didn't, but I just feel like he probably didn't make it easier on the guys. They certainly did open up. We got a lot of that from them, but I feel like that was a result of one person taking the leap. I did this peer leadership training in high school, and one of the things that we were taught that really stuck with me is that vulnerability will bring vulnerability. If you want someone to open up to you, you should open up to them first. And it's certainly something I've used in different situations, and it's always worked. It's not let me clarify. It's not a manipulation tactic, even though the way I described it just made it sound that way.
Exactly like that.
But I think when I've been in other leadership positions where openness would benefit the end goal, I was always open first, and it's not a foolproof thing where 100% of the time it gets people to open up to you, but it certainly makes it easier for them to open up to you, and it helps with the trust. It builds a bond, is what I mean.
And as you can see, I mean, everybody there, not everybody, but close to everybody, really wanted to say stuff like that, or to open up like that, even if they said they sort of didn't. Like, you kind of had to see the people that didn't want to open up. They had to be actively against sharing that stuff. Like, people are so willing, once you put them on that plane, that equal plane, they're so willing to sort of divulge themselves to you. And I think, people should do it more often. Maybe it might be healthy. Who knows?
I definitely agree with that. And I think in a situation like this, I feel like the answers people gave was really indicative of how serious they were taking this process. Because those are everything the guys brought up. Those are things that eventually would come up in a real relationship. But on a show like this, where you do not have a lot of time with the person you're trying to form a relationship with, you have to bring those things up a lot sooner than you would in a regular relationship. So it's almost like, not to say you don't have any choice, but if you're taking it seriously, it's definitely a move to take. And I think another thing with a lot of these guys, I will say, I think overall, this season and even the last season, the types of men that are being brought into this show seem to be the highest quality men available on the market. You obviously have a few who aren't quite there yet, or who aren't there for the right reasons. But I think by and large, a lot of these guys are really sincere and genuine guys. So I'm not surprised that a lot of them opened up the way they did. And another thing that a lot of these guys have talked about is even just going on this show has been stepping out of their comfort zone. And I feel like once you're out of that comfort zone, you got to keep going. You got to keep going deeper into what you're uncomfortable with, because that's the only way you're going to grow. And I feel like not only are these guys trying to maybe be engaged by the end of the show, but a lot of them do want that self-improvement that comes along with being part of this process.
Mm-hmm. Wow. No, I think I agree with you.
Thank you. But another thing that comes up with being very vulnerable, as we saw, is things can get really, really heavy, really, really fast. We saw that most of all from Katie, and I won't get into it too much because of the nature of the topic, but I feel like that is a huge stepping stone for this show, to be talking about something like that and to actually be addressing it, because statistically, about 1 in 4 women experience sexual violence in some form at some point in their life, which when you think about it, that is terrible. That's a terrible number. But when you have these seasons, it's bound to happen to one of the contestants, unfortunately. And to be open about it finally gives other people a platform to talk about it, which, again, you watch these reality shows because they're fun and they're dramatic and they're entertaining, but they're also real people that we're talking about. So I feel like when we signed up to do this podcast about reality TV, we didn't necessarily anticipate seeing such heavy topics, with what we saw last season and now what we're seeing this season. But I think it's definitely going to be a huge, huge stepping stone and pointing the show in the right direction for what we're going to see in later seasons.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think it seemed pretty genuine. It didn't seem like a type of cash grabby thing. Mm-hmm. So I gotta say, good looks. Good looks.
Yeah, definitely props to Katie for starting that conversation and bringing it up. And hopefully, things like this, the end result is always to bring change and awareness. So hopefully that is what happens. And we don't just see it, oh, this is important for a week and then we're never going to talk about it again. There's no way to know what the end result is going to be until we're there, but hopefully there's something positive out of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Definitely. And hopefully nobody abuses that sort of trust.
Yeah. And I think for these guys, it was very impactful for most of them, and I think it's going to give them a lot of appreciation for Katie, maybe more than they had before. But we'll see how it works out. Again, we saw vulnerability from pretty much everyone in that group except for Thomas, who we only saw red flags from him. Again, the charming nature, the smile, the telling Katie what she wants to hear, not what he needs to say. If anyone was skeptical about Thomas before, I feel like if his actions in this circle didn't solidify for you that he may not be super genuine, that I don't know what will. And I gotta say, I'm really, really shocked. I don't want to say that Katie's falling for it, because I think I certainly in her shoes would fall for it as well. So I'm not judging her for that, but I am a little surprised that she's falling for it, because I feel like she's very perceptive, more so than I think most women might be in this situation. And I feel like she can see through bullshit, for lack of a better term, a little faster than most people might. So I'm surprised that she's not seeing through Thomas.
No, I get you. I totally agree with that. He just seems phony. He's a phony. I mean, he's a government plant, and he's a phony. That's all you get out of me.
Yeah. But from that date, we did see that Connor B, Catboy, got the date rose. Little surprised that it was him. I was personally expecting it to go to Hunter, maybe, because I feel like Hunter really, really opened up. I gotta say, I'm really loving Hunter. I know he's not gonna make it. I don't see anything between them. He just seems like such a good guy. He also... What? What's wrong with Hunter?
Nah, I feel like he's too much in the middle, which, hey, might be exactly what, keeps him around longer, but I just feel like he doesn't stand out enough to win it.
I don't think it's not that he doesn't stand out enough. I feel like he's going to be one of those guys who's such a good guy that Katie's going to want to try to see if there's something with him. But in the end, it's going to turn out there's nothing there. Not because of her, not because of him, just because they're not going to be compatible. But I feel like he's going to last a while because Katie's going to want something to form, and ultimately it's just not going to. That's my prediction for him. Yeah. But I gotta say, I definitely am a fan of him. Another guy that I'm now, because of this episode, a huge, huge fan of is Michael A. He was the second one-on-one date for this episode, and we absolutely have to talk about it because he's probably one of the most sincere guys I think I've ever witnessed on a show like this. Like, wow. Not just his backstory, which is heartbreaking and really makes you feel for the guy, but even just the way he spoke the whole time and how he was feeling and being open, like, that was crazy. That date was crazy.
Yeah. And that was, I don't know, that was the last thing I expect from the show.
Why is that? That they would cast a guy like that?
No, that a guy like that would participate.
Yeah, you're right. Well,
I don't expect that. No digs on him. Because, you know, what he finds in her, he finds in her. It was just out of the blue for me. Total twist.
yeah. Yeah, I can see that a little bit. The only thing I can think of for why he might have chosen to go out for the show is because he knew it through his late wife. Because a lot of these guys, I feel like, are pushed by for the ones not seeking clout, that is, are kind of pushed by other people to join the show because it's like, oh, you'd be so good, or oh, you never know what'll happen, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like I guess when I think about it, for a guy who's just getting back into the dating scene, it is a weird choice to choose a dating show for your first steps back into dating. But props to him for doing it, because I imagine for someone that genuine, it was not an easy decision to do this. I think he's going to go far. My only concern is when things get really, really serious. Not that he is not going to be serious about it, but is he ready for that type of commitment again? You know, for your first real relationship post losing your spouse, to know someone for a few months and jump right into an engagement, that is a big and crazy step. And I feel like it maybe isn't a step that he should take quite yet. Even if he's ready, I'm not sure that it's something he should do, because in the long run, is a fast engagement really the best thing for you if you're healing from something like this?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point to make, because that seems like a lot.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a lot. And I think it's going to be one of those situations where it doesn't hit you how much it is until it becomes very, very real. Because this early into the game, I don't think it's real for a lot of the guys. They're just kind of seeing where it goes, which is something, you know, we've kind of seen that before, where it gets to the point where, you know, there's 4 or 3 guys left, and it's like the rings start coming out to be viewed, and they're like, whoa, we get engaged at the end of this? Like, that's real? You know, we saw that with Brendan and Tayshia's season, and he freaked out because he had been married before and it hadn't worked. And when the opportunity came and the realness hit, that's what he was getting into again, and he freaked out. And I think that's to be expected from some people, but at the same time, it's like you should probably try to anticipate that feeling.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do a show where the point is to get engaged at the end of it.
That's the whole, like, second half of it is you know, saying let's do that.
Yeah.
You'd hope they'd anticipate it just a little bit. So, are we doing the picks?
Yeah, I think with that, we're ready to do our latest segment. So, ladies and gents, we have a new segment where every week or so, me and Nash are going to name some people from the previous episode that we would love or leave. My picks for this episode, obviously, Michael's one of them. He, I think, won the hearts of everyone in America. How can you not? So for my picks for Love 'Em, obviously Michael A is one, and I'm going to say Hunter for my second one. I really, really love Hunter. I don't think he's going to make it very far in terms of his relationship with Katie, but the guy just seems so sweet and sincere, and I just want to give him a hug. So those are my 2 on my Love 'Em list. On my Leave 'Em list, we're going to go with one of the obvious, which is Thomas. I don't trust the guy. I certainly believe that he is there with the intention to be the Bachelor. Granted, I think every guy or most of the guys probably know that in the back of their head that's a possibility for them. But you don't say that, you know? It's kind of one of those passing thoughts that might come, and you let it go. It pops into your head, and you leave it. I think any guy who says they haven't thought about it is probably lying. but at the same time, I don't think as many guys consider it as heavily as Thomas did. So I don't trust him. I want him to go. Another guy I want to go, because, again, I kind of already gave him some heat earlier. Other guy's Aaron. It's not that I don't trust him. It's not that I don't think he's there for the right reasons. I just think he's not ready, and especially not ready for a woman such as Katie. So those are my picks.
Okay, I'm going to agree with Michael, but I'm gonna say Connor B. I'm gonna go with it.
All right, Catboys won your heart, huh?
I think he hit heavy. His opener was a little weird for my taste. And that's right, ladies and gentlemen. I'm dropping Box Boy. What was his name?
James. I'm dropping
Box Boy James. So you heard it here first, folks. So if you're a betting person, put your money on Connor B. Anyway, I think I agree with the Aaron thing, but just to offer a little diversity, I'm gonna say I don't like Brandon.
We haven't seen. Okay, I'm going to pick on you a little bit because I feel like we haven't seen anything really from those guys, especially Brendan. I actually want to see more from him. I feel like he's probably a really, really good dude. Maybe just a bit shy, which, eventually being shy on the show can certainly come back to bite you. Because you have to open up. The show moves way too fast to not be open. But I'd like to see more from him. Same with James. I feel like James is not shy. He just hasn't gotten the time. And I'd certainly be interested to learn more about him. He's intrigued me since he came out of the box. I will be honest. I think the box was a really bold move. And I think only bold people would do something like that. So I want to learn more about that.
Well, see, the thing is, I'm not saying drop him from the show entirely. I just don't think he's going to make it. Because last week he was my front runner. That was last 2 weeks ago. He was, that box was a great idea, but I don't think he really capitalized after that. So I don't think he's going to win. And I definitely agree that Thomas should leave because I just don't like him.
I don't like him.
Bad guy.
He's too smooth of a talker. Anyone who's that... Well, it could be totally calculated. I feel like when he pulled Katie aside for a second talk because he didn't like how his first one went, it's like, okay, cool, you had time to rehearse this time. Congratulations. Like, you nailed the act, because that's all it is an act. I feel like I sincerely feel like he wants this for clout, which I didn't think on his first appearance. On his first appearance, he seemed like, okay, this guy's confident. He's a little wowed by Katie. That's pretty good. But now as we're seeing more from him, or should I say less, because we haven't seen anything different than what he gave us on the first night, which was some charming lines and a pretty face. And I don't think we're going to get any more from him. But certainly at this point, there's no chance he'd ever be the Bachelor. So if that was his goal, he
got him.
He really threw it out the window. I will say, from the guys we named, I don't think any of them are going to end up with Katie at the end of this. I think Michael's probably going to go... Michael and Connor B are going to go the farthest out of any of the guys we named from those two lists. But I still don't think either of them is going to end up on one knee by the end of the show.
Oh, ye have little faith.
Yeah, little faith. There's still a lot of guys on the show that we didn't talk about tonight that I would love to see more from. Hopefully in the next episode, we do get to see a little bit of them. We also, in the next episode, based on the promos, see an old face. Blake Moynes comes back. He was part of Tayshia's season. I personally was always a fan of Blake. I think he falls a little fast, but I think him and Katie, I think they're going to be pretty compatible. I don't know that he's going to go all the way. I feel like it's going to start a lot of issues with the guys in the house, and that may hurt him. But I think based on how he acted in his season, I think he's a little immature. I think he's got eyes that are a little bigger than his heart. He has these grandiose ideas of love, and I think maybe they're a bit unrealistic because when it came to both Claire and Tayshia, he fell really fast and then there wasn't a lot there. But I don't know, I feel like they're both sex positive for those who don't remember Blake as much from the last episode. He was very, very open about all of that. So I think that's going to be kind of that initial thing is they're both really, really cool with it. They both can have conversations about it. And I think they both seem like, at the end of the day, pretty down-to-earth and kind people. But we'll see. I was always a fan of Blake, so I'm personally not upset that he's making a comeback. I think it's a little weird being that he was going after Tayshia, and Tayshia's a host on the show. So we'll see how that plays out. But I don't know. I like Blake. I'm not upset about his appearance.
Yes, because everybody on this show knows who that is.
Well, people who watch the show know who that is.
Yeah, I'm excited for him. He's great character. Everybody loves him. I mean, how could you forget that time he did that thing? And I can't wait for more of moments like that.
All right, well, with those very, very detailed words from Nash, I think that wraps up another episode. Until meantime, Trash Talkers, follow us on Instagram, watch previous episodes if you haven't, and Nash, take better notes. With that, we're signing off.
What are you...
Nope, with that, we're signing off. Goodbye, folks.
Bye.